He is a former CDA student. He graduated from TSU with his undergraduate degree in 2007, and then he graduated from Vanderbilt in the CDA program in 2016. And when I look at his resume, I can see how he built his path in a real intentional way. And I always say people get to where they need to be. And sometimes on the front end, you don't really realize how you're building it and you're making some strategic decisions. And then when you look back, you think, oh my gosh, I could have planned this. This was really a planned path. And so in 2000, Brandon was a recreation manager at the Boys and Girls Club of Middle Tennessee. He went on to become a program manager at the Martha O'Brien Center. Then he became a program manager at the Oasis Center. In those 9 years, he was really serving on the ground in those centers. Then he became a national program director. It was a grant program distributing $1 million annually, and it was Usher's New Look Foundation in Atlanta, Georgia. And when I think about this, I realize how Brandon was tapped for very special things on his path. It was his kind of excellence in the work that he had done in the past that led him to keep getting newer and newer and more important responsibilities and experiences. He was a consultant to 100 Black men of Middle Tennessee. And then he became a consultant in 2013. Sorry, my phone just went off. He became a consultant in 2013 with Vanderbilt University and managed recruitment and outreach efforts for the Center for Health Service Research for research on men's health. He then, from 2013 to 2019, so this is overlapping his time as he was a student in the Community Engagement Coordinator at the Nashville Conflict Resolution Center here in Nashville. In 2010 to 2019, he was also the program director with the Mayor's Office of Nashville-Davidson County and the Oasis Center. And he really worked on directing community and organizational change efforts for government, nonprofit, and public sector work. So he was at the intersection of that. Currently, Brandon is the Senior Director of Community Engagement for the Nashville Soccer Club. And I think you're probably thinking, now, how did he get to the soccer club? And I'm going to leave that to him to talk about how his path directed him to that and why he saw that was an important experience for him to have. The last thing I want to say, though, I've given you kind of his stepping stones in his path. But the first time I met Brandon was on Jefferson Street. Remember that, Brandon?
I sure do.
And it was on MLK Day. And Vanderbilt was there for the march celebrating the MLK holiday. I was introduced to him by his supervisor, Judy Freudenthal, at the Oasis Center. And one of the first things he told me when he realized I was from Vanderbilt, he says, I really want to go there. And Judy said, you really need Brandon in that program. So I never want any of you to not realize the connections and the networking that you can do and the people that you can meet in some of the most unlikely places that then put you on a journey with them. Brandon has been one of the people, like many of the students I have had, who taught me probably more than I ever taught him. And it was his passion, his dedication, his determination, his persistence, and his heart that defined him. And that is what I saw on that street that day. And then Brandon came to Vanderbilt. And so, Brandon, welcome back. I'm so proud of you, not only as an alum, but who you keep becoming in your life. And I know that this is going to be wonderful for you to share your path with our students and our staff and our faculty. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Sharon, you always make me tear up. You got to stop that. That is just, I cannot tell you how appreciative I am for our relationship and for everyone at Peabody. Peabody is still family for me. And every time I get a chance to come back and connect with students and with faculty, it's just such a pleasure. I mean, people say it's a pleasure, but no, I really just, you know, it's such a tremendous opportunity for me. And I just get butterflies every time I get to come back and hang with you all. So very thankful for y'all to have me here. And when I first got to see about what PATH was about, it was really, it just spoke to me because I feel like my entire journey was really built on purpose. And so, you know, what I like to do is just to tell you a little bit about my journey, and I want to leave as much time for questions as possible. But, you know, hopefully to see if it may provide some insights or, you know, some encouragement for where you are in your journey. And you know, hopefully this will be of value to you at some point. But first things I'll say right now, as Sharon mentioned, I oversee community engagement efforts for Nashville's latest pro sports team, which is Major League Soccer, Nashville SC. As I talk more about kind of my journey, it'll make a little more sense as to why this role is important for me, and not ever a role I could have ever imagined being in. I actually remember my first year in undergrad, I met an individual who was with the Atlanta Hawks. And I remember just thinking, like, how in the hell do you get a job like that? Like, where do you apply for that job? And it's really shocking to me today as I still mentor students who are an undergrad and even high school students. And I can share a little bit about how it might work. So first things first, I grew up in James A. Casey Homes, which is, if you're going down the interstate, Titan Stadium is to your left, you'll see the big brick city to your right. It actually looks a little different these days because they've been renovating it, which you probably know a little bit about. But James Casey Homes is one of the largest public housing communities in the city. Some of the more recent stats I have seen, it's over 90% African American. The average annual household income is close to $10,000. So very, very far below the poverty line. The unemployment rate there is about 4 times what it is the average for the city. And this was a huge stat to me. Over, I think something like over 75, 80% of the homes are single parent homes led by women, as mine was. Stanford had a study that came out in 2015 that talked about social mobility, and Davidson County is ranked amongst one of the worst counties in the country in terms of helping poor students or poor children move up the economic ladder. You know, in terms of my experience and my background, I am not a person who should have come out of that. But one of the things that I always like to share to students is that if it were not for the community around me, if it were not for some opportunities, I would not have had a chance. And there were so many people who did not have the opportunities that I had. And you know, unfortunately, that's the work that we're about. You know, people who come from Peabody, we're change makers. We're people who want to solve the problems of the world. And you know, I'm one of the people who you all, your work will be able to have to affect people like me and have more stories like mine, hopefully. But to get onto the kind of the path, I grew up in Casey Homes. And when I graduated high school, my family had moved to the suburbs and we were living in Antioch. And when I graduated high school, there was a guy who worked at my church. He's a youth pastor. His name is James Lowe. Right now, he's a pastor at Bethel World Outreach Center. But he had just taken over the youth development program at Martha O'Brien. Now, I was a first-year college student, and I was a business major. And some hotshot guy who my mom knew had got me a job interning at AT&T. And it was making some pretty decent money for an 18-year-old. And James Lowe, who was this guy who went to my church, he said, you know, I'm working at this place, the Martha O'Brien Center, and there's a Boys and Girls Club that's kind of set up that, you know, within our center. And you used to live in this neighborhood, didn't you? You know, I have a program with teenagers. You know, I was 18. He was like, you know, they're teens here, and why don't you just, I'll give you a job. Why don't you just come over and just hang out in the rec center, shoot pool, play video games, and I'm not going to pay you any, you know, much of anything, but why don't you come over and take this job? Now, I was 18. I was making, you know, some decent money for an 18-year-old. And for whatever reason, it really just spoke to me because that was my old neighborhood. I knew exactly who these kids were, type of issues that they dealt with. And it just really spoke to me that it was a place where I could be valuable. And that was really one of the biggest lessons that I started with was, and this is, you may have heard this before, but this is just my motto. I don't know if this is for everyone, but the lesson for me was do not chase money, but chase purpose and chase value. Find places where you can be valuable and insert yourself in those opportunities. When I went, I took a major pay cut to go to be a broke 18-year-old college student working in a rec room at the Martha O'Brien Center in my old neighborhood. But I learned so much at the Martha O'Brien Center. And through that experience, they were crazy enough to promote me when I turned 19 years old to the teen outreach director at the Martha O'Brien Center. I initially turned the job down because I was scared. I was like, I'm not, that's a grown-up's job. Like I am not the person that should be doing that job. But I had some mentors around me, Marsha Edwards, who's still the CEO there. And they said, you know, we're gonna teach you what you need to know. And I learned all about the nonprofit industry. You know, it was completely different from what I thought. But it was, you know, it was about grants, and it was about, you know, how do we engage funders, and how do we do unique fundraisers, and how do we, you know, there was a lot that had to do with actually trying to help the community, but it was so much more to it. But I really got to learn about the way nonprofits work. And that's honestly the second big lesson and kind of, you know, bullet point I wanted to share is that you always have so much more to learn than you have to teach. I was somewhat of I felt like I was, you know, an expert because I lived in the neighborhood, but I learned so much there. And one of the things I like to tell my interns and young people that I'm mentoring is that, you know, especially coming from a wonderful institution like Vanderbilt, when you get out into the world, a lot of times you have the tendency to, you're just so full of knowledge and excitement that you want to just go and share everything you know and tell people how it's done. But it's always important to wherever you go to go as a learner because there's always so much more to learn. I don't care how brilliant you are. I don't care if you graduate top of your class. There's so much more to learn than there is for you to teach. Don't get me wrong. I want you to teach and I want you to go out and share what you know, but always commit to be a learner. And that was really what I did. Now, for me, it was a little easier because I was 19. You know, nobody expected me to know a lot, but I learned so much at the Martha O'Brien Center. From that point on, I think about 4 years later, we at the Martha O'Brien Center had developed a really robust youth development program. And this is how we did it. This is shocking. And I actually told Marsha Edwards this not too long ago. What I decided to do with my teen program at the Martha O'Brien Center was to tell these kids, you know, usually if it's a youth program, you know, you're doing things like homework club and, you know, you have all these requirements that your grant needs you to deliver. What I would do with these kids, I would say, you know what, I don't know if you guys know this, but the way this whole building works is we have grants where people give us money to do things to, you know, improve your outcomes. And the kids were like, really? That's how it works. That's why we're doing homework club. I'm like, yeah, you know, we have gotten $200,000 to do a program that's supposed to increase your literacy. And that's why we're here. That's what keeps the lights on. They were like, wow, well, you know what? I'm going to improve my literacy. I'm going to, you know, I didn't know that that's how it worked. we actually developed a program by teaching the kids how the whole industry worked. And our kids became so just, inspired, not because they really cared about homework club, but because they were inspired that they had learned how the business works. And so they wanted to help us reach our goals. And we had an amazing, successful program at Martha O'Brien. I believe at the time I was there, 100% of the kids that came through our program were accepted to college, which is crazy for, that particular neighborhood. But that was another learning lesson for me that was really all about sharing what you know. So often, we have all this amazing insight and we're not willing to share it with the people around us, especially the clients who are, the people who come to the community centers or the people we're supposed to serve. There seems to be kind of a bit of a barrier between us sharing everything that we know. But one of my mentors told me, Brandon, you're supposed to share your power. So, the fact that you are aware of how this works, that's power. You need to share that with people. And that was really the way we operated our program. So we had a really robust program at the Martha O'Brien Center. And because of that, I got recruited to the Oasis Center, who was also doing citywide youth engagement work. And so at the Oasis Center, we developed a pretty big youth organizing platform. We actually partnered with Peabody on a number of our projects where we had young people who were addressing major kind of systemic community problems as it pertained to their schools and their neighborhoods. We had students working on issues of college access. I remember at the time, students in Stratford, we did a report where there were 90% of students in Stratford and Maplewood, which are East Nashville high schools, that reported they wanted to go to college. And at the time, only about 10% of them were making it to college. And so once again, we ask our students, what do you want to do about this? And we engage them as leaders and as stakeholders. Instead of doing things to them and for them, we work with them to try to solve these problems. And that was what our work was about at Oasis. Now, as Sharon mentioned, the way that I got to work with Usher was that, for those who don't know, Usher Raymond, the singer, he's actually from Chattanooga, Tennessee. People think he's from Atlanta, Georgia, but he's from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he had came to Nashville to do an episode of Extreme Home Makeover. And it was, something that his foundation, his charity was a part of. So when they came to Nashville, they built the house in Clarksville, Tennessee. And while they were here, they wanted to do some research on successful youth programs. And they heard about the work that we were doing in Nashville to engage students as leaders and to the robust civic engagement programs that we had here in Nashville. And so they stopped by Oasis Center. And I got to meet Usher and his team, and we told him all about the work that we were doing. And as a result, they recruited me to come to Atlanta and to be the national program director for Usher's foundation. And essentially, what I got to do was to replicate the work we did here in Nashville to about 7 or 8 cities around the country. Now, the learning that for me that happened in there was this. Whereas that was a great experience, Usher is a great guy. It was very cool to get to move to another city and to learn about how other cities are addressing this work. But I learned 2 things. Number one, when I was working for Usher and going to some of these cities, probably about half of the cities that we worked in and that I would go to these cities to learn about who are the Oasis centers and the Martha O'Brien centers and who are the Peabodys in these cities. And what I learned is that about half of the cities that we went to, they were actually studying Nashville. And so I left because I thought there were, cooler things on the other side. But what I learned is that those folks were actually interested in what we were doing at home. And so that's a great lesson for people to never undervalue the importance of the work you're doing right here. The other thing is that whereas it was a really fun experience, organizationally, it was it wasn't a very well-run organization, and I was miserable in Atlanta, mainly because, I did not have the same community around me. And once again, the lesson for me is that sometimes that dream job that you think is your dream job because it's glamorous and it's glitzy is sometimes not the opportunity that you really want or that you really need. So be careful of that. When I went to Atlanta, I just could not wait to have a chance. I was yearning to come back home. And so I stayed in Atlanta for a little over a year. I had the opportunity. They were making some transitions and they were asking me to move to another city. And I said, I'm going to come back to Nashville because from what I've learned here is that so many people are looking at Nashville. And, you know, I was a part of the work in Nashville. So I want to come back home so I can continue what we were building here. And so I got to come back to Nashville. This is around 2011. And this is around the time that I met Sharon. And just to tell you a little bit more about that as well, when I was in high school, I had a guidance counselor to tell me I would never go to Vanderbilt. I actually applied. It was my dad's dream for one of his sons to go to Vanderbilt. And when I wanted to apply as an undergrad, my counselor told me it wasn't realistic and that, you know, you're not Vanderbilt material. And I was a pretty decent student. I don't think I had the ACT scores, but I was willing to work. But I was told at an early age that it wasn't for me. And so when I came back to Nashville from Atlanta, and I met Dr. Shields in the streets at MLK, and she got to learn a little bit about my background. And what she said to me was that, you know, we need to have voices like yours and experiences like yours to inform the rest of our students at Vanderbilt. And I took it upon myself. It was hard as hell because I didn't have any money. And it was, you know, it was difficult. I had been out of school for probably about 5 or 6 years. And, but I took it as a challenge to make sure that I was able to enroll in CDA. And CDA was probably the most impactful experience of my life because I was able to bring all of my experience to the classroom and to share that with my classmates. And this is another thing that I always share for individuals who may have taken some time out of school. If you've taken time to, you know, work on your profession and now you're back in the classroom, don't feel bad about that. I know sometimes it's like, you know, uprooting you from, you know, your normal foundation to place yourself back in the classroom. But it can be a really tremendous experience reflecting on what you know and what your experiences have been and sharing that with your classmates. It really elevates the learning for everyone. And that was my experience at Peabody, was really, you know, validating the things that I thought I knew, filling in some of the holes and sharing all these insights with the super diverse cohort that was around me. I always tell folks, you know, some of the most valuable learning that you'll have at Peabody is actually not from your professors. It's from the people who are sitting in the seats around you. So really take advantage of that. That collective, collaborative learning is so important and is actually usually the key to solving problems in your profession. If you do not know this is another thing that was shocking for me. The more I got out into my career and I got to work, when I was working for Usher, we used to have people from, you know, heads of state and, you know, CEOs of huge, you know, international companies. I remember I had a pretty regular meetings with like the CEO of Home Depot at the time. And one of the things I learned was that usually the biggest challenges that huge companies and cities and municipalities face, it's really just about the inability for them to learn from all the other entities and industries that are around them. That is usually the most difficult challenge in some of the biggest problems. It's the fact that people are not able to really learn, how does that department over there work? And how does this particular you know, partner organization work? A lot of the magic and I think the solutions that need to be found are through having that collaborative learning. And that's really what we do at Peabody, you know, more than anything. And so take advantage of that. So anyway, came back to Peabody, had a wonderful experience. And as I was at Peabody, I was working through the mayor's office and trying to solve a lot of the problems that our communities were facing. And I was able to really, in real time, utilize everything I was learning in the classroom in my professional practice. And that was just such an amazing time for me and was really the core of a lot of my learning. And so fast forward, I graduated from Peabody in 2016. I continued working with the Oasis Center and with the mayor's office just up until last year. And here comes Major League Soccer to Nashville. And for those of you who have, seen the soccer team and just, Ethan, as a sports guy, one of the things that is soccer is such a communal sport. The camaraderie that's involved is the only thing that we really have in the United States is like college football, where it's somewhat more than the game itself. The essence is really just in the spirit of the people who are there and the unity that exists within people who are crazy for their teams. You mix that with the fact that it's an international sport, and there's a huge growing international community here in Nashville. You also mixed it with the fact that it's such an accessible sport. The average kid cannot walk outside and play hockey. The average kid cannot walk outside and have football equipment. But if you have any space on a ball, you can play soccer. And so it's so accessible. And not only that, Major League Soccer has a goal to be the most inclusive of all the North American sports leagues. And so when you look at kind of what's going on in our world right now, and incidents in the past where the NFL did not have the leadership at the top to understand how important it was to recognize player protests, and you have leagues that are not sympathetic to some of the growling that you hear in our communities of people demanding change. This is an amazing opportunity to be able to leverage the power of a pro sports team to accomplish some of the things that we want to accomplish in the community. And so I would have never in a million years thought that I would be in a role like this. And I have young people who I mentor who were just like me 20 years ago and said, hey, where's the application to apply for that job? And like Sharon said, it's really just a culmination of those experiences. And so I really consider myself lucky. I wake up every day and I do what I love to do. I would do this for free. But some of like I said, the biggest lessons, and I just kind of wrote down some of the highlight bullet points, and I can talk all day and these types of things. I don't know exactly what's valuable, but some of the things that really stood out to me in my journey is that, like I said, number one, find out what you're passionate about and what you really can wake up and do for free every single day. That's where that's where the treasure lies. I cannot tell you, actually I can tell you, there have been probably 2 or 3 times in my professional journey where I went after money. Every single time it ended in a disaster where either I was miserable or it just was not the right fit. And to me, it's just so not where you want to be. But when you can find somewhere where your particular experience can be valuable, people will seek you out. I don't say this to brag, but I've not applied for a job in 18 years. I've always been sought out because, when you're in that particular space where you are doing, you're acting from your purpose, and you are doing what you love, and that you found out where you can be most valuable, people, you will thrive, and people will seek you out for that particular thing. And so find out what you're passionate about and go that route. I mentioned this before, but you always have so much more to learn than you have to teach. Wherever you go, this is an old grandma anecdote, but about how you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So you should be listening twice as much as you should be talking. But it's always really, important to go in and think about all you have to learn. And also, one of the big things that stood out to me in my Peabody experience was in thinking about whose knowledge is valuable. A lot of times we tend to think that it's the person with the fancy resume who we should be listening to, but there is amazing expertise in a lot of the people that you're serving. And you need to make a habit of, listening to the voices of the people who are typically not heard. And that's really what a lot of our work has been about over the years. More times than not, the key to success lies in learning. You've probably, I don't know if you've had a chance, I know you LOP folks, You probably have taken lots of classes that have to do with organizational learning. I cannot tell you on a daily basis how shocked I am at how many of the biggest challenges that we deal with in any profession lie in the inability for us to learn. It is shocking a lot of times how, the high level management is not listening to the mid-level management, and those people are not listening to the folks on the ground, and people have different ways of working, and it's all about understanding and having that collaborative process of learning together. That is typically where success comes from. And there's a lot of value in this collaborative space. And at Peabody, more than any place, that's one of the things that I really learned to cherish and value. How can we all come together? This is one little funny thing. I don't know if it's still like this. When I was at Peabody, it used to be kind of a running joke of just how different the folks were on our side of 21st from the people on like the medical side. I don't know if that's still a thing, but but it was such a great example of just how different people in their disciplines tend to only be able to think about their discipline. I feel like one of the great things that has helped me is that I've always lived in the sandbox where everybody came to play. So when you're kind of in the community sandbox, you have people from the faith-based community that wants to be involved. You have people from the for-profit community. You have people from government. You have people from higher ed. You have people from health backgrounds. You have people from tech backgrounds. And this is just a natural space where we all play together. It's a natural place for you to learn how to collaborate and for everyone to see multiple perspectives. At Peabody is a very unique place to be able to really work on that, that particular part of your craft. And so that's what was really important to me. That's what's been tremendously valuable to me. And it's been really helpful through my entire journey. So, all right, so I have ranted and talked for a while. I was supposed to be looking at the text to see if there are any questions, but I guess at this point, because we're nearing the 15 minutes left mark, I'll open it up for questions. And if there's anything that I kind of zoomed through this so fast, if there's anything that I can share more about, or if there are any particular questions you have about, anything that I've talked about, we'll open it up for questions at this point.
I have one. So you mentioned like at Peabody really utilizing the resources of even other students in your program. Like what other advice do you have to capitalize on your time here, since like most programs are so short, they're only 2 years? What experiences did you have, or just advice you have in general?
Great question. So many of the students, I would say in my cohort, there were, one of the ways to characterize students was there were students who were very, very intent on getting out and engaging with as many organizations as they could. And then there were some students who were just, solely about the books. I got to get I'm solely focused on my course of study. I would really encourage you to, as much as you can, find ways to apply what you're learning in the classroom to actual things that are happening out in the community. And Peabody is such an amazing place for this. There are tons of nonprofit organizations, community organizations, even for-profit or companies that have real life challenges right now going on that you are learning about and that you can add some insight and be valuable. I would really encourage you and everyone to seek out opportunities to go and engage with the actual community. And it can be difficult because you have a lot going on, but your learning should be, the best learning, in my opinion, is learning in context. It's one thing to learn about this in a book, but when you're able to go out and actually apply some of these things in the real world as they're happening and have that context to really guide your learning, that is tremendous. That was what was, if I would have went to Peabody before I had my professional experiences, the learning would not have been nearly as rich. And so, especially if you're a student who has not yet had, if you've not yet started your professional journey, try to find opportunities to go out and engage. And you don't necessarily have to have a specific role in an organization. Go as a volunteer. But once again, just try to go out and connect with real things happening and apply and try to see your learning through that lens, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Brandon, there's a great question in the chat from Olivia that says she's curious about how COVID has impacted your job in the Nashville Soccer Club and how it may continue to do so.
Yeah, COVID has just, gosh, it has impacted everything. I think particularly for community practitioners like yourselves, so much of the work that we do relies on kind of personal connections, learning together in the same space. And it's very difficult to do some of the community impact work that we want to do virtually. It's just it's a different thing. If we were all sitting together in a circle right now, as rich as this conversation is, it would have a different effect if we were together. And so, and that's especially the case for when you're trying to build and develop young people, especially. So it's been very challenging. I'll tell you the truth. We're just waiting for the time when we can actually go back and engage in person. But most, just like you all, most of our activities have shifted to virtual learning. Our players have not been able to engage face-to-face in the community. We're supporting lots of things through player videos and having our players join Zoom calls just like this. And so it has a pretty tremendous effect on us, but then also the need in the community has gotten greater. Families are suffering more. The need to support has only grown. So this is a challenge that you all are built for. If you did not know before you came to Peabody, you're in superhero training right now, and these are the challenges that you all are preparing to tackle. And so this is a time more than any time that you should really be motivated by the fact that we're here to solve a lot of these challenges, and it's a grind every single day, trying to figure it out. So, but yeah, COVID has had a tremendous impact, and it's really affecting every single thing that we do. I see another question about how to measure or assess your efforts in the community. Is there a way to evaluate your success? Great question. I'll tell you, number one, pretty much every community organization worth its salt has moved towards what they call evidence-based practice. In the world today, you are not able to just go out and say you're doing a good thing without having evidence to back up your impact. And so the interesting thing is that whereas community organizations and nonprofits have really been doing this for a long time, there are lots of other companies that are kind of just now getting the memo that it's not okay to just do things that are fluffy and look good, but you actually have to be able to measure your impact. And so for the most part, so many of the measurements that we take are based on individuals. So if you participate in a nonprofit organization and you get to evaluation time, typically you'll give a kid or a parent a survey, a pre-test and a post-test, and that's been the typical model. But we're right now really interested in ways to measure community level change, and it's one of those things that it's something that we're wanting to do more and more. So it's a lot about trying to assess the right data to figure out how we can collect information. So we work with organizations right now like Juvenile Court. Of course, we work with MNPS, but trying to figure out how we can measure our impact on a community-based level more so than the individual-based level. But right now, a lot of what we do is in measuring our impact on individuals. But it's one of those things where that's another challenge that you all will be, will have the opportunity to learn about of how do you measure your change. And I wish I could tell you more about, because we launched our community department in December, and I think 2 months after we launched our department, we had our opening kickoff game, and 48 hours after our opening kickoff, the tornadoes hit in Nashville. And then 2 weeks later is when COVID hit. And so we have really just, with the soccer club right now, we've really been in reaction mode and just trying to meet the needs of the community that they're asking our help with. As we move forward, one of my jobs is going to be to figure out how do we measure our impact on a community-based level. And I may be reaching out to some of you all to help us do that, you know, because that's one of the things, you know, we're looking for help in doing that. So it remains to be seen, but maybe you can help me figure that part out.
Brandon, Courtney, and I, for our office, were a part of Sarah Suter's class, her assessment class last semester, to figure out, you know, tools for assessing some of the programming we do. I don't know if you've done that yet or been one of the community partners, but that would really be coming full circle if your organization was part of Sarah's class sometime in the future.
I know all about Sarah's projects there, and it was definitely one of the things on my mind. And I still have my materials from that class. So yeah, it's definitely something that we're going to be thinking about. And listen, it's such a unique opportunity because, you know, we are trying to impact not only our community around the fairgrounds where our stadium's being built, but we're thinking about how do we affect whole regions of the city and even the state. So it's interesting, and it's something that would definitely be a learning challenge. It's one of those authentic community engagement opportunities that I was saying you seek out. So yeah, we, as soon as we we're at this point looking into next year, and our league is really thinking about how we're going to move forward. And so as we get more information, that would be a wonderful opportunity. And I would love to engage some students from Peabody in helping us think about that.
I have another question. You talked about mentors a lot, either mentors that you had or like you are mentoring people currently. Like, how do you seek out good mentors? And then how are you able to provide that to other people? Do they come to you, or do you just find them in workspaces or volunteering?
Yeah, so I, for over 15 years, worked with young people. My role in the mayor's office was to train and develop. That we had a couple programs. The Mayor's Youth Council was about 40 to 45 high school students each year, trying to train them to be civic engagement leaders. And so, I have lots of students who have now began in roles that are community-based roles that will reach out to me, and I have great, kind of dialogue and conversation with them. And then quite often I'll have folks from Tennessee State University, which is where I did my undergraduate work, folks from Vanderbilt who will say, hey, we have this student, he's interested in XYZ, or she's interested in that, and can you talk to them? And sometimes it's a hit and sometimes it's a miss. Sometimes I can offer something that's valuable and sometimes I can't. I would say to me, the key is really about the relationship. Great example, Dr. Shields and I, she's one of my favorite people because our relationship is one where I know I can talk to her about things. We've she's given me insights for years and years and years. I may not talk to Dr. Shields for months on end, or not when I never know if I'm going to see her, when I'm going to see her, but when I do, our relationship is so rich, and that allows for mentoring to happen and for it to be natural. So I would say when you're looking for a mentor, relationships are key. Figure out how you can, find a mentor that, relationally matches you and what you're looking for, and more so than just tidbits of advice. But yeah, seek out mentors any way you can find them. And they're not always traditionally the way you think they might go. I have a great relationship with a mentor that I've never met, that I email only. It's a guy who's a consultant that I got to work with years ago on a project, and we just kept in touch, but it's all through email. And I've gotten some of the richest insights from that relationship than many others. So there's no one shoe fits all approach, but mentors are very important. You should have them. You should work on them. You should also find mentees. You need to always give back and share your power. And so as Sharon mentioned, I learn so much more from my mentees a lot of times than I even feel like I give to them. So it's an important part of your work.
I'm going to jump in real quick because I think Brandon makes a very important point. I think sometimes we make our mentor-mentee relationship, we try to make it too formal and not relational. We think that it's something we have to make a call and get advice, but it's not. It's a give and take. It's a relational piece. And so mentoring and being a mentee means that we're both open to ideas. And I can tell you that I know that if I needed something, or if Sarah Suter needed a placement for a student, or we needed insight into something, I can call Brandon and say, what's happening? Can you tell me about this? Can you tell me about this issue? Just like today, you've asked him about the impact of COVID. He's talked to you about external factors. And all of us, whether we're a professor, an alum, a student, we're all really in this to be lifelong learners, and we can be that to each other. So that mentee-mentor relationship has evolved into a very reciprocal type of relationship, and it is built on a lot of respect for what each other brings to the table. And I just get so informed. I'm not a person that is at the Martha O'Brien Center every day. I'm not a person that's with the soccer league every day. I have a peripheral view, but I have some social capital and resources that I can share with those organizations. And part of that is that I'm, a professor or an associate dean that has access to students, researchers, faculty, and others who can build a much better integrated and symbiotic community together. And I think that that's a very important point. Never underestimate what you bring to the table and the mentoring reciprocity that you can give to all of us. It's really important. I get so informed by students that helps me to think about the things that I need to be doing in my own job. Because it's not just me sitting in a corner thinking up everything. I need to have the informed information from grassroots, from the people that are going to be affected by my decisions. And, that is a much better conscious, intentional use of power that one holds because of their position or their experience or just their passions. And, Brandon's exactly right. We don't have to have a monthly call to be a mentor to each other. It's when we need it, we always know it's there.
That's right. My best mentors were not people who were all knowing and gave me what they knew. My greatest mentors were people who I learned from through the relationships that I had with them, through things that may not have even been shared but were observed. Those types of things were some of my greatest learning. I wanted real quick, somebody asked a question about what other skills are important to develop, specifically when it pertains to listening and learning from communities. And I'll just say right now, the thing that stands out to me, it's empathy. Empathy right now, especially what we're seeing right now with the public discourse of how it's so hard for people to understand perspectives, and it's just the toxic environment that it's really a toxic learning environment. No one can hear from each other right now. No one's able to actually understand one another right now. And you may not think of this as being an essential ingredient to your role, but empathy is one of the most important ingredients to your role, of being able to really take yourself out of yourself and your values and your perspectives and what you think, and try to seriously place yourself in the perspective of someone else. It's a really hard thing to do, especially when you've gotten this amazing Vanderbilt education and you have all these things that have been poured into you, to be able to then step outside of that and try to see things differently. But empathy is probably one of the strongest skills that you can develop. There's so much more we could say, but it's 1 o'clock. So for those of you who have to go, and I want to be respectful of your time, I just want to say I appreciate your time, and I'm going to put my email address here. If anyone needs to reach out, if you have other questions, if there's anything I can do to be helpful, Please don't hesitate to reach me. I'm always glad to be available to my Peabody fam. And I hope this was, in some way, shape, or form valuable for you. And yeah, I just appreciate you taking the time.
I want to say thank you so much, Brandon. This was so inspiring, and I had not met you before, and just hearing you, I feel like you're going to be a friend of mine. So
Absolutely.
I want to thank everybody that's been on the call. We'll have another Path Dialogue in October. More details coming about that soon. We hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll stay on for a couple minutes. If anybody has any lingering questions, I'll stay on for a minute or two.
Sure.
Here. So thank you, Brandon.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brandon. Just want to say good to see you again.
Yes, you too, Selena.
All right, bye.